In the audiophile community, I'm sure you've encountered people who insist that vinyl records are the absolute be-all and end-all of sound quality because they are the purest form of analog audio reproduction and they give you a warmth and realism that digital audio simply cannot match.
For a while, there's been certain audiophiles who claim that anything digital's bad, and they can spot digital from like a mile away.
There have been a number of these people over the years who have talked about all the damage that digital recording and playback does to musical enjoyment, and they need an all analog signal path from recording to playback.
You know, they're the ones with the hot stereo system, the special tone arm on their, turntable that they got from Germany. And they're there to enlighten us like wine connoisseurs as to the majesty of analog.
Well, the truth is, vinyl is digital. If you listen to almost any record made since the 1980s, you are listening to a digital recording. Even if the album didn't begin life as a digital recording, chances are it was mixed and mastered digitally, or was made from a digitally remastered copy of the original analog recording. And as you can tell by these album covers, this is something that the record companies used to brag about. This one from 1987 says digital. This digital disc utilizes the latest advancements in computer sound technology. For the listener, this translates into a remarkable state-of-the-art audio experience, a brilliant display of sharply etched detail, spectacular dynamic range, impressive clarity, and freedom from distortion. Made from digitally recorded master tapes, this disc is compatible with all LP phonographs. And digital recording has been around a lot longer than most people think, because here I have a copy of the first album ever made using PCM digital recording. It was recorded in Japan in 1970 and released in January 1971. This is a vinyl re-release from 2022. It's called Something because it contains a cover of the Beatles song, which was only a year old when this was recorded. It's by Steve Marcus, and inside is all in Japanese, but it mentions PCM recording, non-distortion cutting, and they were using a 13-bit 32 kilohertz system developed by NHK in Japan. On the back they wrote, "It's an important historical marker not only for Japanese jazz but also for recording in general, since it was the first work recorded on PCM digital audio." Now you may be saying, well, so far I've only been showing fancy pants classical, jazz, and new age music. What about the pop and rock music that ordinary people listen to? The first digital recording by a rock artist is commonly cited to be this one, Bop Till You Drop by Ry Cooder, but that's not true. That honor actually goes to Stephen Stills. If you're down and confused. He became the first digitally recorded rock artist on February 7th, 1979 in Los Angeles using the 32-track 3M digital recording system, which cost $115,000. It recorded 16-bit digital PCM audio at a sampling rate of 50 kilohertz onto 1-inch magnetic tape running at 45 inches per second using a cabinet full of circuit boards. Using the recordings from that session, which were also done simultaneously on analog tape, they pressed 100 copies of a promotional LP and distributed them to producers to demonstrate the difference in quality between digital and analog recording. Unfortunately, his record company felt that the recording was not the kind of music that would sell in the contemporary market, so the master tapes were shelved and the recording has never been commercially released. So Ry Cruder does get the credit of having the first digitally recorded rock album to be commercially released in 1979. It was also recorded using the 3M system, and Ry said, "For the first time, we were hearing back exactly what we played. Instead of noise, we heard each sound perfectly." Ry also said the difference was like night and day, and that analog recording was flat and one-dimensional. Ironically, the same thing that audiophiles say today about digital recording. Aerosmith producer Jack Douglas also began using digital recording that year. He said, "You would think that digital would be more suited for classical, and certainly classical recordings show off digital, but it does make a difference with screaming guitars and big heavy drums. This music has a lot of dynamics." And I like how that article misspells Aerosmith as Arrowsmith. And the first digitally recorded album to become a major pop hit is this one, the 1979 self-titled debut album by Christopher Cross. It was also recorded using the 3M 32-track digital system, and it won 5 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year, Song of the Year for its #1 hit single Sailing, and Best New Artist. Another #1 hit from 1979, which was recorded using the 3M 32-track digital system, was Herb Alpert's big instrumental disco hit, Rise. But although it was digitally recorded, it was transferred to analog tape for editing. But Fleetwood Mac's Tusk was the opposite. It was an analog recording that was transferred to digital for mixing and mastering. They employed the SoundStream system, which used 16-bit digital audio with a sampling rate of 50 kilohertz, just like the 3M system. Other digitally recorded albums in 1979 from major artists included Giorgio Moroder's E=MC², which also used the SoundStream system. Baby Blue, Baby Blue. And Stevie Wonder's Journey Through the Secret Life of Plants, which was recorded using the Sony PCM 1600 system. That had 16-bit digital audio with the same 44.1 kHz sampling rate that was later used on CDs. Send her your love with a dozen roses. And at the Audio Engineering Society convention in May 1979, Ampex introduced a new mastering system, including the ADD-1 16-bit digital delay for the cutting lathe, allowing records to be digitally mastered regardless if they were analog or digital recordings. The New York Times summed it up in November 1979 when they published an article titled, "Digital Recording Techniques Are Already Being Widely Used in Pop Music." They quoted Herb Alpert, who in case you don't know is the A in A&M Records, as saying, "For me, the sound of digital is just amazing. It enables you to do things you normally couldn't do. I really can't say enough for the purity of the sound." Give me the night. By the early 1980s, the artists using digital recording or digital mixing and mastering are too many to mention. In 1980 alone, the list includes Barbra Streisand and Barry Gibb, Billy Joel, Bruce Springsteen, Carlos Santana, Chicago, Dave Grusin, Fleetwood Mac again, George Benson, Hart, Kenny Loggins, The Outlaws, and Stevie Wonder again. Actually, all of Stevie Wonder's albums from 1979 onwards were digital recordings made using Sony equipment. And over on the classical music side, in December 1980, Polygram reported that an estimated 70% of their sessions were using digital recording. And in June 1982, this article said that digital has now become the normal technology for nearly all new major recordings. Fewer and fewer new catalog editions will appear in the analog mode. In October 1982, Billboard reported that most classical recordings produced in the UK are now being cut on digital equipment, and many major rock artists are reportedly insisting that their record labels put them into digital studios in the future. That includes Steely Dan member Donald Fagen's 1982 album The Nightfly, which audiophiles often use to demonstrate how good vinyl can sound, not realizing that it's actually a digital recording. I guess because it shows a turntable on the cover, they think it must be analog.
What a beautiful world this will be. What a glorious time to be free.
So if digitally recorded albums were already common over 40 years ago, why do some audiophiles still insist that analog sounds better? Well, part of it is that some early CDs did sound a bit cold and shrill. And if that was your first impression with hearing CDs, that's still going to stick with you all these years later. As this 1985 review of a compact disc player says, CD isn't perfect, or rather it is, and that's a problem. Early discs did sound harsh. A characteristic of pressing LPs is that they drop off from 5 to 10,000 Hz, so recording engineers tend to boost those frequencies when they mix master recordings. A few slight cuts with an equalizer bring the first discs back to super smooth sound. The laser disc has a perfectly flat response, so whatever is on the master won't be masked when you play it back. And then about 15 years later, in the late 1990s, many digital recordings started to sound bad again due to the loudness war. That's where mastering engineers kept increasing the loudness of the recordings until the sound got distorted, lacking in dynamics, and tiring to listen to. While the mechanical nature of a phonograph record imposes a limitation to how loud you can cut the audio in the groove and have the turntable be able to play it without skipping. So if you compare a modern album on vinyl versus how it sounds on a CD or digital download, it can sound better on vinyl, but not because vinyl is analog. It's just because the vinyl version is mastered better. But the real solution for bad digital audio is not to go back to analog, it's to go back to good digital audio. Like this digitally mixed and mastered album from 1983 by Terry Adams, which sounds excellent despite being pressed on wafer-thin 92-gram vinyl. I've also heard audiophiles claim that digital audio is fine, but only if it's kept purely digital all the way through the process. They insist that converting an analog recording to digital, or vice versa, causes a significant loss of quality. But I think these excellent sounding recordings that are a combination of analog and digital made using 1970s technology debunk that myth. As Herb Alpert said back in 1979, I think digital to analog to digital is still better than just analog. Going back to the 1985 CD player review, it says most sound quality is lost in pressing records and copying cassettes. A CD from an analog master isn't quite as good as from a digital master, but its superiority over an LP is still like day and night. I'm not anti-vinyl. All the records I have in my collection prove otherwise. What I'm against is the mistaken belief that if you connect your turntable to a Bluetooth speaker or a digital soundbar, you're defeating the purpose of listening to vinyl because it's supposed to be a purely analog format. Well, the purpose of listening to vinyl is to listen to music, regardless if it was analog recorded, digital recorded, or a combination of both. And if it sounds good to you, then it's serving that purpose perfectly.